Hey everybody, Johnny the Queer POTUS here. And over the years, I've gotten a lot of questions about the sexual orientation of presidents. And since this is Pride Month, I thought it was time I did a deep dive on the subject and made an honest attempt to solve one of history's great mysteries. Were any presidents gay? Since the dawn of presidential scholarship, historians have been awkwardly answering one question. Was there ever a gay president? And almost always, the question revolves around one president in particular, our 15th president, James Buchanan.
Our first call-up is from Worcester, Massachusetts. Good morning.
Good morning. Yes, I have a question. I had heard that President Buchanan had first of all, a rather controversial and rather flamboyant vice president. And I also heard that there had been some scandal or some rumor, maybe by his political opponents, concerning his own sexual orientation at the time.
So that was the first question asked on the program.
Sure, I believe the vice president that the caller is referring to is William R. King of Alabama, who was really Pierce's vice president for a few weeks before he died. King and Buchanan lived together in Washington. Now, let me say immediately that there's no disgrace in that.
Wait, no disgrace in that? Yeah, well...
However, King was a very interesting person in that his own sexual orientation was open to question. He dressed very flamboyantly. In fact, Andrew Jackson called him Aunt Fancy. And when King was sent to, I believe, France as ambassador there, he wrote back to Buchanan saying, "I hope nobody replaces me in your affections." But there is no real evidence that Buchanan was involved in that way that some people suspect. We simply have no evidence.
Richard Keller's answer contains every pillar of what I hate about the way historians have always answered questions about presidents' sexual orientation. 1. Sure, many men were affectionate together, but it was normal back then.
Many men lived together in boarding houses there because they hadn't brought their families to Washington.
It's possible he's trying to say that in a time when being gay was considered not normal in the way it is today, men could openly show their affections toward one another, even sleep together, without causing people to inquire about their sexual orientation. But that's if I'm being generous to Mr. Keller. It seems more likely that his answer hinges on a belief that only heterosexuality is normal. You know, good old natural heterosexuality, like humans have always practiced. "Get away from me," said the caveman to the other caveman. "I'm a heterosexual." Number 2. Someone in history used a homophobic slur against him.
Andrew Jackson called him Aunt Fancy.
Okay, so no one's sexual preferences should be boiled down to whether or not someone called them an Aunt Nancy. Least of all a total jock like Andrew Jackson. And finally, number 3.
We simply have no evidence.
What exactly qualifies as evidence that someone is gay? I mean, sure, we have evidence that Warren G. Harding had sex with a woman because of a literal DNA test proving he fathered a child out of wedlock. But having had sex with a woman does not qualify as evidence you are straight. It's evidence that you had sex with a woman. How President Harding felt about the experience? Whether or not he was thinking about Calvin Coolidge and a Speedo the entire time? Well, that's something we'll never know about. Now all I can do is think about Calvin Coolidge and a Speedo. The point is, the only thing we do know about James Buchanan is that he was not an openly gay man. But we know this to be true of every man who has thus far served as our nation's president. So what do we know about President Buchanan? We know that he never got married. He never had any children. He's our only bachelor president. We know that he lived with his friend, Alabama Senator William Rufus King, for 15 years, and that Andrew Jackson once called them fancy pants. And we know that the two exchanged many affectionate letters. Almost none of these letters are available to historians today. But a brief note written by Buchanan to Congressman John J. Roosevelt does survive, and it sheds a little bit of light on how Buchanan felt about men. It begins with a regretful mention of a meeting between Congressman Roosevelt and Senator King.
I envy Colonel King and the pleasure of meeting you. and would give anything in reason to be of the party for a single week. I am now solitary and alone, and have no companion in the house with me. I have gone a-wooing to several gentlemen, but have not succeeded with any one of them. I feel that it is not good for a man to be alone, and should not be astonished to find myself married to some old maid who can nurse me when I am sick, provide good dinners for me when I am well, and not expect from me any very ardent or romantic affection.
So why, if we can never know for sure what James Buchanan's sexuality was, do we even bother asking the question at all? Well, if we did find evidence someday, whatever that may be, showing that one of our presidents was gay, it would certainly aid in the battle to show that gayness is, and has always been, a normal part of the human syllabus. It could also help any gay politician or candidate for president today say, hey, we've had a gay president before, why not now? Of course, I don't know if you'd want James Buchanan to be your role model. Buchanan is consistently ranked the worst president of all time. However, there has been speculation about the sexual orientation of one of the highest ranked presidents. Abraham Lincoln was a family man. He had 4 children with his spouse, Mary Todd. We have plenty of letters between Lincoln and his wife suggesting they were very affectionate toward one another. But do we have any evidence that Lincoln was, for sure, a dyed-in-the-wool 100% heterosexual? Nope. All we have is the default assumptions of our heteronormative society that someone is straight until proven otherwise. That said, many claims have been made throughout history that Lincoln was gay. For starters, Lincoln was known to prefer the company of men and was extremely awkward around women. As one of his exes, Mary Owens, once pointed out,
he was deficient in the little links which make up the great chain of a woman's happiness.
Now, a whole series of conclusions could arise from that statement. Lincoln was a bad boyfriend. Lincoln was just not a ladies' man. Maybe Lincoln was an incel. Or maybe Mary Owens was just complaining about an ex. Ultimately, this quote is far from a smoking gun. Too soon? Lincoln was known to share a bed with other men. He lived in the upstairs apartment of his law office with his partner, Joshua Speed, for years. Only one bed. And when Lincoln stayed at the soldiers' home during his presidency, he was rumored to be sleeping with the head of his security detail, Captain Derrickson, whenever Mary Lincoln was out of town. This is usually where the historian jumps in and assures us all that it was normal for men to share a bed back in those days. To which I just want to say again, it's normal for men to share a bed no matter what time it is. We need to get away from this normal word when we talk about these things. I think the fact that we say it was, quote, normal back then says more about how conservative we've become now. I mean, straight men used to wear tiny shorts all the time and no one batted an eye, but nowadays they have to walk around in leg burqas that almost reach to their ankles. Okay, maybe that's just my hobby horse. So, that's about it. From these scant threads of anecdotal evidence grew an entire discourse on whether America's greatest president was gay. The speculation grew largely in the 1970s during the gay rights movement. And it was around this time the gay wing of the Republican Party was founded, the Log Cabin Republicans. If anything, I'd say the Lincoln was gay movement was really more of a vestige of changing attitudes in the 1970s than a legitimate unearthing of an erased history. In fact, how people answer the question of whether President Lincoln was gay often says a lot about the times they were living in. Let's see how Lincoln author David Long answered this question on C-SPAN during the 1990s, when attitudes were loosening, don't ask, don't tell was the policy in the military, but marriage equality was still decades away.
My first reaction is, so what? I don't know that anybody can say with absolute certainty what Lincoln's sexual orientation or practices were. Nobody knew him personally who's with us today, And he didn't reveal those things in his public statements or his private utterances. But if so, would it make the Emancipation Proclamation any less important?
Yeah, I'm not sure why Lincoln being gay would have any effect on the Emancipation Proclamation one way or the other. This answer seems to have a
Now everyone's gonna think we're gay! Not that there's anything wrong with that!
vibe to it. Although the 1990s was a more open time for gays in this country, you still get a sense of the embarrassment attached to approaching this question. 1999. Though I think it is fair to say that besides that remark, David Long is mostly correct. Just as with Buchanan, Lincoln appears to have taken the truth about his sexual orientation to the grave. So we don't have much in the way of proving that our greatest president was gay. But we may have some tidbits about the greatest First Lady. Eleanor Roosevelt was married to her husband, President Franklin Roosevelt, for decades. But years after her death, over 3,000 letters surfaced between the First Lady and a journalist named Lorena Hickok. Hickok was assigned to cover Eleanor during the 1932 presidential campaign, and she quickly developed a bond with her subject. The two often enjoyed each other's company at the president's Hyde Park estate, or on long cross-country trips together. Their 30-year relationship was no secret, but it wasn't until 1998 that the treasure trove of letters exchanged between the two became available to the public, largely due to FDR's relatives suppressing the information. These letters reveal a close and intimate relationship between what appears to be two soulmates.
Hick, darling, all day I've thought of you, and another birthday I will be with you. And yet tonight you sounded so far away and formal. Oh, I want to put my arms around you. I ache to hold you close. Your ring is a great comfort. I look at it and think, she does love me, or I wouldn't be wearing it. I wish I could lie down beside you tonight and take you in my arms.
I've been trying to bring back your face, to remember just how you look. Funny how even the dearest face will fade away in time. Most clearly, I remember your eyes, the kind of teasing smile in them, and the feeling of that soft spot just northeast of the corner of your mouth against my lips.
Even after the publication of these letters, historians still contented themselves with notions that what they wrote to one another doesn't actually prove that they were in a relationship. No one ever questions a person's heterosexuality, but demonstrating someone's gay requires ironclad proof beyond even an unreasonable doubt. I believe this has a lot to do with people's fear of how an historical figure's reputation might be damaged if it were to come out that they were actually gay. And in that sense, I actually do understand what David Long was trying to say when he said that if Lincoln were gay, it wouldn't change the Emancipation Proclamation. Certainly wouldn't change it for me. It would actually make it even better. Many presidents throughout history, it has been rumored, have gone beyond the heteronorm. But one that surprised me in doing my research was actually John F. Kennedy. Now, Kennedy was known for his many lurid affairs, including one with actress Marilyn Monroe.
Happy birthday, Mr. President.
But some believe that JFK did not restrict himself only to female partners. Kennedy had a longtime friend named Lem Billings. Lem and Jack befriended one another at boys' boarding school and became very close. According to legend, the two experimented sexually as youths and maintained a strong and possibly intimate bond throughout their lives. When Jack was elected president in 1960, Lem moved into the White House where he had his own bedroom. The Kennedy White House, affectionately known as Camelot, became a space for a litany of gay icons, including Hollywood stars, playwrights, and writers like Jackie Kennedy's cousin, Gore Vidal. When Kennedy was assassinated in 1963, Lem was devastated. Saying he'd felt as though he'd been struck by lightning, Lem called JFK the love of his life. That is actually a really sad story, I have to say. So let's perk things up a little bit with my favorite rumor. Believe it or not, there are some speculations out there that our most recent president, President Barack Obama, might have been gay. And they come from the most reliable of sources. Pastor: Vladimir Putin will out Obama within 100 days. So in August of 2014, a pastor named James David Manning of the ATLAH World Missionary Church in Harlem said, "I want to prognosticate today that 100 days from now, either Vladimir Putin himself or one of his assistants or someone within the Russian government will call Mr. Long-Legged Mac Daddy, will call him an outright gay pervert." Oh, God. So clearly you can see that there aren't actually any credible rumors about President Obama, but this does give you a sense of how accusing someone of being gay is often used as a weapon. Shouldn't be used as a weapon because there is nothing wrong with being gay, right? Ultimately, the question of whether any president was gay has run up against one consistent objection among historians. As James Down, a professor of history at Connecticut College, puts it,
"The notion of being gay is a brand new concept that doesn't emerge until the late 19th, early 20th century. It's a different historical moment. Men have been in intimate relationships with men, but they are not gay. They are men who had sex with men."
Well, thank you for that information, Professor Downs.
This sounds to me like the objection of someone who sees heterosexuality as the default setting and homosexuality as the deviation. I think the proper way to look at things is that until gay and LGBTQ rights emerged as a political movement, heterosexuality was legally and culturally enforced in a way that wasn't necessarily natural to the totality of the human experience. Nature doesn't draw a hard line between which gender can love which gender. Society does. If historians want to say it would have been impossible or very unusual for two men to live an openly gay lifestyle during the 1860s, that I can understand. If historians want to say that gay people didn't have access to the verbal tools to identify their own sexual identity and gain acceptance in a heteronormative society, that's fine with me as well. But did that stop Walt Whitman or Oscar Wilde or possibly James Buchanan? In at least two of those cases, no, it did not. So perhaps it's time we historians stop trying to slam the brakes every time someone spots a parallel between the gay experience of today and those in our past who shared that experience. Perhaps it's time for the dark clouds of ambiguity over this issue to disperse and for the big, beautiful rainbow of queerness to shine across our great human history. Thanks everybody for listening in to this video. I just want to remind you to like this video, to subscribe to the channel, click that bell for notifications, and make sure you become a patron to this channel. You can see in the description below there is a link to my Patreon site. Finally, I just want to thank all the people who have donated to this channel this month. All those donations are going to Black Lives Matter Washington, D.C. chapter, and I've already donated that money, so that's really awesome. All right, well, have a wonderful day, and once again, happy Pride.